You'll never own a house like your brother, Sophie. Some people just aren't meant for success. My mother said it lightly, like it was just another family joke, but her words sank deep enough to stop the laughter at the table for a second. Then everyone chuckled again, pretending it was harmless. I smiled back, small and polite, because that's what I always did. The china clinked, the roast cooled, and my brother Liam leaned back, smug and comfortable in the chair he'd claimed since childhood. He'd just bought his first home, a big one, new mortgage, new car, new pride. The way my parents looked at him, it was as if he had carried the whole family name to heaven. "You've really made it, Liam," my father said, passing him another helping of potatoes. "Your grandfather would be proud." I just nodded, because the words weren't for me. Liam turned toward me with that perfect grin that had always landed him out of trouble. "Don't worry, Soph, maybe next time you'll get lucky. Keep saving those pennies." The laughter started again. I forced a smile, but my stomach burned. I'd been saving for years, not for a mansion, just for something small, something mine. But none of them cared about quiet effort. They only saw what shone loudest. When I excused myself to the hallway, the air felt colder there. My reflection in the mirror stared back like a stranger. Calm face, trembling eyes. The woman looking at me had spent her 20s paying off their debts, staying behind when mom was sick, taking shifts she didn't want, living carefully so they could live easily. I pressed my hand against the wall and breathed slow. "You're fine," I whispered. But the tremor in my voice betrayed me. I wasn't fine. I was exhausted from being invisible. From the dining room, I could still hear their laughter. "She's always been practical," Mom said. "Not everyone's built for big things." I used to believe that. I used to think staying small kept things peaceful. But peace built on silence feels like rot. You only notice it when something inside you finally breaks. It's strange how words meant as jokes can stay buried for years. If you've ever been quietly pushed aside by your own family, you'll understand why I didn't laugh that day. I leaned on the doorframe, watching them through the mirror's edge. My brother's hand rested on the back of his wife's chair, the same easy charm in his posture that always made people forgive him too quickly. My parents beamed, lost in the glow of their successful son. And there I was, the one who stayed home, who helped when they couldn't, who was never enough to brag about. Dad poured himself another drink. "You know, Sophie's good with numbers," he said. "Maybe she can help you set up your tax stuff." Liam smirked. "Sure, but she charges family rates, right?" They laughed again. I just nodded. Of course. That's how it always went. A favor here, sacrifice there, all swallowed without acknowledgement. The same story told 1,000 times. I fix, they forget. After lunch, I helped clear the table, listening to my mother talk about color palettes for Liam's new kitchen. She didn't notice my silence, or maybe she did, and preferred it that way. When she reached for a glass, I caught her wrist gently. "Do you remember when you said I'd get my turn?" She blinked, confused. "Your turn for what, honey?" "To live my life." She smiled faintly, the kind that dodged truth. "You already do, Sophie. You've got stability, a nice apartment, your little job. You don't need more." My little job. The words stung like vinegar. I released her wrist and stepped back. Right. When they left later that afternoon, the house was quiet again. I stood by the window, watching Liam's car pull out of the driveway. Mom waved from the passenger seat. Dad didn't look back. It wasn't the first time they'd made me feel small, but something in me shifted that day. Maybe it was the way they said it so casually, like my dreams were nothing more than decoration for their comfort. Maybe it was the way no one noticed I'd stopped pretending to smile. I sat down, opened my notebook, and looked at the budget I'd been managing for years. Every cent tracked, every payment made on time. I could have owned a house if I hadn't been cleaning up their messes. But I didn't say that out loud. Not yet. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. "Don't forget the down payment transfer. Mom said you'd handle it." I stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurred. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Instead, I whispered to the empty room. They measured my worth in square footage. And for the first time, I didn't believe them. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though it was just 15 minutes of dim streetlights and wet pavement. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the road still glistened under the yellow lamps. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. I kept hearing Mom's words from lunch, over and over, like an echo that wouldn't fade. "You'll never own a house like your brother." The kind of sentence that lingers longer than it should. I'd helped Liam more times than anyone remembered. When he needed a co-signer for his first car loan, I was 22 and still living on instant noodles. When he ran short on tuition money, I dipped into my savings without a second thought. I told myself that's what family did, help each other. I just didn't realize help only went one way. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone was buzzing. Dad's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd ask how I was doing. Maybe he'd noticed how quiet I'd been. I answered anyway, knowing better. "Hey, Soph," he said, voice distracted. "Just wanted to remind you to wire the 5,000 for Liam's home closing tomorrow. He's wrapping things up at the bank." I paused, staring at the dark windshield. 5,000? Yeah, part of the down payment. Your mother said you'd handle it. There was a silence he didn't notice. I could hear the TV in the background, the sound of laughter that wasn't mine. "Right," I said quietly. "I'll take care of it." "Good girl," he said. Then the line went dead. I sat there for a minute, the phone still in my hand. My reflection in the black glass looked tired, older somehow. I wasn't angry, not yet, just hollow. Being needed but never valued felt like living on borrowed air. When I walked inside, the apartment greeted me with its small silence. The same soft lamp, the same stack of bills, the same scent of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I hung my coat, sat at the table, and stared at my laptop. I opened my bank app out of habit, checking numbers I already knew too well. I'd been saving for a modest place of my own. Nothing fancy. Just a house where no one could call me the one who stayed behind. The next morning at work, the air smelled faintly of copier ink and coffee. Numbers filled the screen in front of me, endless rows of other people's finances. I'd spent years helping clients fix their mistakes, balance their books, and find relief. It was ironic how I could repair anyone's mess except my own family's. My boss called me into his office before lunch. "Good work this quarter, Sophie," he said, handing me an envelope. "A small bonus. You've earned it." It wasn't much, but it was something. Enough to almost cover the exact amount Dad had asked for. I smiled politely, said thank you, and walked back to my desk with the envelope in my hand. It felt heavy for its size. For a while, I just sat there, the cursor blinking at the bottom of a spreadsheet. I knew what I was supposed to do, what they expected. It had always been automatic. Help first, think later. But something in me hesitated this time. I stared at the transfer form on my screen, my finger hovering over confirm. I could almost hear Mom's voice saying, "You've always been the responsible one, Sophie." Responsible. That word used to make me proud. Now it felt like a chain. I exhaled slowly, my throat tight. "It's just money," I whispered to myself. But it wasn't. It was another quiet way of saying I didn't matter. When I finally clicked send, the confirmation tone felt like a door closing. My bonus vanished in an instant, swallowed by someone else's dream. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. There was no satisfaction, no peace, just the quiet ache of giving again and being unseen. That's when Mason, my coworker from the next cubicle, leaned over. "You okay, Sophie? You look pale." I blinked and forced a smile. "Just settling a family debt," I said. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Maybe that made two of us. Every dinner had a rhythm, like a play we'd rehearsed our whole lives. Mom would start with a story about Liam's latest success, and Dad would add the proud commentary. "That boy's always had drive," he'd say, as if ambition had skipped me entirely. Then came my part, the quiet nod, the polite smile, the invisible applause. I learned early how to take up as little space as possible at that table. When I was little, I used to think love sounded like applause. The louder they clapped for Liam, the more I tried to earn a piece of it. Straight A's, perfect attendance. Every quiet achievement folded neatly into silence. "You're steady, Sophie," Mom would tell me, pouring coffee like it was a compliment. "Liam's our dreamer, but you keep us grounded." I didn't realize back then that steady meant predictable, safe, forgettable. I remember the day I graduated college. My gown itched, the air was thick with summer heat, and Liam showed up late wearing sunglasses and charm. He took pictures with my parents before I did. When I finally joined them, Mom smiled but didn't move closer. "Let's take one more," she said, standing next to him instead. I smiled anyway. That's what I was trained to do. Their love wasn't cruel. It was selective, conditional. It lived in the spaces between moments where praise could be rationed and silence used as currency. Dad's affection came in comparisons. Liam's really making something of himself. Liam's taking risks. Liam's not afraid to dream. I used to wonder what he'd say if I ever failed loudly enough for them to notice me. By the time I turned 32, I could predict every conversation before it started. Mom's tone, Dad's questions. Even Liam's smug grin when he mentioned something new he'd bought. That night, sitting on my couch with the sound of the fridge humming in the background, I realized my whole life had been one long rehearsal. I knew my lines by heart. The next day, Liam called. His voice was bright, careless. "Hey, Soph, we're doing a dinner Saturday, kind of a celebration for the house. You'll come, right?" I hesitated, just for a second. "Sure," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." "Good," he said. "Mom's already planning the menu. You know how she gets." I laughed softly, because that was my cue. "Yeah, I know." When we hung up, the silence felt heavier than usual. My apartment was small, but it was mine. Every bill, every mug in the cupboard, every picture on the wall. I'd earned it. Still, it didn't matter to them. I could already hear Dad's voice at that dinner. "It's not about how much you have, Sophie. It's about what you build." He'd look at Liam when he said it, of course. I poured a glass of water and stared out the window. The city lights flickered like tired stars. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just tired of being predictable, tired of smiling on cue, of being the one who made things easier for everyone else. Sometimes I wonder how people don't see what's right in front of them, the difference between kindness and convenience. I had spent years mistaking one for the other. That night I tried to sleep, but my thoughts wouldn't settle. I thought about the years I'd given, time, money, patience, and how none of it had ever felt like enough. I thought about Mom's soft voice saying, "We're proud of you, honey," in the same tone she used for weather updates. I thought about Dad, shaking Liam's hand like he was a colleague, not a son. When I finally drifted off, I found myself standing in front of a house. It was grand and bright, the kind you only see on magazine covers. The porch light glowed warm against the night sky. I held a key in my hand, feeling its weight press into my palm. I took a step toward the door, but before I could reach it, the light flickered and went out. Through the window, I saw them all, Mom, Dad, Liam, laughing around a table. My chair was empty. I lifted the key again, but it slipped from my hand and disappeared. The house vanished with it, swallowed by the dark. And somewhere, beneath the quiet, I heard their laughter again. Only this time it sounded real. The restaurant glowed with soft light, the kind meant to make everything look warmer than it really was. Glasses clinked, laughter rose and fell, and I felt like I was sitting inside someone else's memory. Liam sat across from me, grinning like the world had unfolded just for him. "So, Soph," he said, swirling his wine. "Still renting that tiny apartment of yours?" I looked up, calm. "Still paying it myself," I said. Mom laughed softly, not cruelly, just carelessly. "Maybe she just doesn't want the pressure of ownership. Some people like freedom." Freedom. That's what she called it. I felt the smile stay on my face because that was part of the performance. The family script never changed. Liam won. I clapped, they toasted. I disappeared. The waiter came around asking about dessert. I shook my head. My appetite had gone somewhere quiet, somewhere safer. Dad ordered coffee for everyone but me. She doesn't drink caffeine after 6, he told the waiter, as if I were a detail he still controlled. I sat there, watching their reflections in the glass window behind them, wondering when my face had started to look so detached. Liam lifted his glass. To family, he said, and new beginnings. To Liam, Mom added, her eyes shining. Finally, a homeowner. Dad raised his glass too. Your grandfather would be proud, son. I sipped my water. Congratulations, I said softly. No one noticed the pause that followed. When the laughter returned, it filled the space between us like smoke. I could almost taste the distance. Dinner carried on like a dance. They talked about furniture, paint colors, interest rates. I nodded at Mio all the right times. Invisible applause from my side of the table. It's strange how a person can exist and still not be seen. When the plates cleared, the waiter brought the bill in a small black folder and set it in the middle. Dad didn't even look at it. He just pushed it toward me. Be a dear and take care of this Sophie. Just this once. Just this once. I almost laughed. Even Liam didn't meet my eyes. Of course, I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. It almost surprised me. I pulled my card from my purse and slipped it into the folder. The waiter took it away without hesitation. Like this was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe it was. Mom smiled faintly. You've always been so helpful. The words landed like glass on the table. Pretty, sharp, empty. I watched the waiter return, thank me softly, and leave the receipt beside my plate. My name, printed neatly on the bottom, looked foreign, like it belonged to someone who didn't know better. I folded the receipt, tucked it into my purse, and sat back as they moved on to another story about Liam's contractor. I stared at my water glass until the room blurred a little. It wasn't anger that rose in me. It was a kind of stillness, the kind that comes when you finally see the truth of a thing you've been pretending not to notice. After dinner, I hugged them goodbye. Mom kissed my cheek, Dad patted my shoulder, and Liam gave me a distracted smile as he checked his phone. Thanks for coming, Soph, he said. Of course, I replied. The night air outside felt colder than it should have been, the kind of cold that made you want to stay quiet just to hear your own breath. I walked to my car slowly, heels clicking against the pavement. For a second, I thought about turning back, just to see if they'd notice I'd left, but I already knew the answer. The drive home was long and dark, streetlights stretching into thin gold lines across the windshield. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked steady, too steady, like someone rehearsing calm. Somewhere along the route, I saw it. A small house on a corner lot. Its porch light was out, the yard half wild. A sign stood crooked in the grass. Cash buyers only. I slowed down without meaning to. The words glowed under my headlights, sharp and deliberate. Something inside me shifted, quiet, but real, like the smallest hinge in my chest had turned. For the first time that night, I didn't feel tired. I just felt awake. Numbers don't lie. That's what I've always told myself. They don't twist the truth or shift the story depending on who's speaking. They don't play favorites. They just sit there, clean and cold, waiting for someone brave enough to look at them honestly. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up my spreadsheets. Every line was a record of my quiet endurance. Paychecks, bonuses, bills, the transfers I'd made for Liam, the savings I'd promised myself I wouldn't touch. I added it all up. Then I subtracted what I'd given away. The numbers stared back like a reflection I couldn't escape. It wasn't enough, not for a house, not for a new start, not even for the kind of life I once believed I'd earn by being good. I leaned back, breathing slow. The apartment was still, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. I thought about Mom's voice, the one she used when she wanted something to sound kind but final. You've always been practical, Sophie. Practical, the word people use when they mean small. For years, I mistook practicality for peace. I thought staying quiet was safer than being seen. I thought helping them meant I mattered. But all it did was keep me in place, while they built lives on my steadiness. I ran the numbers again, slower this time. My savings, my 401k. The modest returns from the mutual fund I'd opened in my 20s. A few thousand here, a few more there. Still not enough. But something felt different. I wasn't angry anymore, just steady in a new way, focused. For the first time, I didn't want approval. I wanted freedom. If they won't see my worth, I whispered, I'll make it impossible to ignore. The words didn't sound like a promise. They sounded like a decision that had already been made. I closed my eyes and pictured my family's faces at dinner, the laughter, the way my father slid that bill toward me without hesitation. The humiliation should have hurt more than it did, but instead, it felt like fuel. Every slight, every favor, every quiet dismissal, all of it had built this moment. I opened a new tab and began researching property loans, interest rates, investment options, anything that could stretch what I had into something bigger. The glow of the screen painted my hands pale blue, and I realized I'd never felt more awake. There's something powerful about seeing your own potential in hard numbers. Even when it's not enough, it's proof you exist, proof you've been holding things together longer than anyone noticed. I thought about how Liam would laugh if he knew what I was doing. You buy property, he'd say. You don't take risks. And he'd be right. Until now. I clicked through listings until the pages blurred together. Townhouses, duplexes, small cottages. Every photo looked the same. Beige walls, cheerful kitchens, promises of a life that didn't fit me anymore. I wanted something that felt impossible. Something that would force me to become the kind of woman they'd never expected me to be. The cursor blinked in the search bar. My fingers hesitated, then typed, luxury properties, Oregon, cash listings. The results loaded slowly, like the world was taking a deep breath. My eyes landed on one link halfway down the page. No photo, just a bold line of text. Private estate, ocean view. $5.2 million, cash buyers only. I stared at that number longer than I should have. It didn't make sense. It wasn't even remotely within reach. But something about it, the certainty, the audacity, pulled at me. I clicked it open. The description was simple. 3 acres on the coast, glass walls, untouched land, no mortgage option, no financing, just one sentence that lingered at the bottom. For serious buyers only. I could almost hear my father laughing. That's not for people like us, Sophie. I smiled faintly. Maybe not, I whispered, but it will be. I sat there in the dim light, the sound of the clock ticking louder than usual. For years, I'd been told what I couldn't do, what I shouldn't want, how far I could go. But in that moment, the limits didn't feel real anymore. Have you ever had that one moment when silence turns into resolve? When you realize no one's coming to save you? I had mine the moment I clicked that listing, and I didn't look away. Don't chase things that aren't for you, Sophie. Mom's voice echoed in my head as I turned off the highway toward the cliffs. Fog hugged the trees, thin as breath. The gate stood open. Small sign by the drive. Private viewing by appointment only. The realtor waited near the path, her smile practiced. Ms. Nate? Yes, I said. Sophie, follow me, please. The path opened to an ocean view house of glass and cedar. Wind rolled in from the water, sharp and clean. It didn't look new, but it looked alive, like someone had loved it quietly. Once owned by a local artist, she said. He painted through storms. I can see why. Inside, the floor creaked faintly. Light spilled across pale wood. I walked to the window and pressed my hand against the glass. Cold, solid, real. The seller's firm on price, she said. Cash only, no contingencies. I know, I said. That's fine. She studied me with polite doubt. And how do you plan to fund it? Cash, I said simply. Her smile faltered. Oh. She looked at my coat, then back at me. Would you like proof of funds? She nodded quickly. I handed her the folder. I watched her scan the statements, her eyes pausing when the totals registered. She blinked, swallowed, then looked up differently. I'll want an inspection for records, I said. And the studio door stays as is. You've seen it? Not yet, but I know it's here. She led me down the hall. The door was paint-scarred, the knob warm. Inside, canvases leaned against the wall, edges curled with time. A sink stained with color, a window wide to the gray sea. The air smelled faintly of salt and oil paint. "This room matters," I said quietly. She nodded, now careful. "Understood." My chest felt still, but not heavy. It wasn't excitement. It was recognition, like I'd walked into a version of myself that had waited too long to be seen. "I'll offer list," I said. "Expedited close. 2 days for review." She hesitated. "That's strong." "It's clean," I said. "That's what matters." Her voice softened. "You've done this before." I met her eyes. "A few times." What I didn't say was that I'd been building this for years, in silence. A duplex bought at 27, sold at 31. A condo rented to a teacher who never missed a payment. I never bragged. I just balanced, reinvested, waited. Every tax refund, every bonus, every decision they dismissed as too careful, I turned it into foundation. When Dad used to say, "Aim within your means," he didn't know I'd already expanded them. I let them think I was small. It kept me free. The realtor folded the papers carefully. "Would you like me to draft today?" "Yes," I said. As she called the seller, I stepped outside onto the deck. The wind pushed against me, cold and sure. Below, the ocean broke itself over the rocks, endless and patient. It looked like power disguised as peace. Mom's words came back again, softer this time. "Don't chase things that aren't for you." I smiled faintly. "This is for me," I whispered. I thought of every time I'd signed their checks, every bill I'd paid without thanks. The quiet currency of being the dependable one. The invisible accountant who made everyone else's dreams possible. They'd never asked what I kept for myself. Now, I finally had an answer. When we finished, the realtor extended her hand. "I'll be in touch soon." I nodded. "I'm ready." Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. The world outside the windshield felt sharper, more defined. I wasn't sure if it was courage or exhaustion, but either way, it was mine. 2 days later, while I was at my desk at work, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I answered anyway. "Congratulations, Ms. Nate," the realtor said, her voice bright and genuine this time. "The house is yours." For a moment, I said nothing. I just stared at my computer screen, watching the reflection of my own faint smile. Then I breathed out slowly. Finally, something that belonged entirely to me. I didn't tell anyone. Not a word. The less they knew, the more peace I felt. For 3 days straight, I drove out to the coast with the trunk full of boxes. Simple things I'd kept over the years. Books, a few framed photos, an old radio that still worked when you turned the knob just right. The house waited for me like it had been holding its breath. I didn't rush to fill it. I moved slowly, room by room, listening to the way my footsteps echoed. There's something strange about silence when it's finally yours. It doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. In the mornings, I opened the glass doors and let the sound of the waves pour in. Salt air touched everything, my clothes, my skin, even my coffee. I caught my reflection in the window more than once and barely recognized the calm in my own face. I hung no curtains. I wanted the ocean to look back at me. It reminded me of who I was before I became everyone else's solution. When I unpacked the few dishes I owned, I laughed softly. For years, I'd told myself I didn't need nice things because I wasn't that kind of person. But it wasn't humility. It was permission I'd stopped granting myself. I bought a piano the second day. A small upright, black and simple. The delivery men asked where to put it, and I pointed toward the window that faced the sea. When they left, I touched the keys once. The sound was clean and clear, almost startling in the quiet. I hadn't played in years. That night, I sat on the floor surrounded by unopened boxes, the piano glowing faintly in the moonlight. I thought about all the noise I'd lived through, the casual insults, the laughter that always seemed to happen when I walked away. the way love had turned into obligation. None of it belonged here. For the first time, I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to explain how I'd done it or why I deserved it. I'd built this life quietly, the same way I'd carried everyone else's burdens. Only now, it was for me. I spent the next morning hanging small paintings, choosing spaces where the light shifted just right. The sea reflected on the walls, soft and blue. It felt like I was being rewritten in gentler handwriting. No one called. No one asked where I was. The world kept moving, and I didn't miss it. I was no longer angry. I was awake. I walked out to the deck and let the wind pull at my hair. The water below crashed and retreated, endless, sure of itself. I envied that rhythm once. Now I understood it. Strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered and waited. By the third evening, I'd stopped counting the hours. I made tea, sat by the piano, and let my fingers rest on the keys. A melody came without effort, soft as a memory. Every note carried a piece of the woman I'd been, patient, tired, too kind for too long, and turned her into something new. The house didn't feel big. It felt honest. I didn't take pictures. I didn't post or brag. I wanted this to exist quietly, like a secret between me and the sea. When the phone finally rang, I almost didn't answer. The screen flashed Mom. I hesitated, watching the waves roll beneath the glass. Then I picked it up. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "Sidam." Her voice too light. "We're visiting this weekend." "At Liam's place, of course." I smiled faintly. "Of course," I said. As she talked about dinner plans and guest rooms, my eyes drifted to the piano, to the view beyond it. I let her words fade into the background, because for the first time, I didn't need to be there. "Another deal closed," Liam said, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Second property this year. You wouldn't believe the profit margin." He leaned back in his chair like he was holding court. My parents smiled like it was a family holiday, not a dinner. Mom touched his arm. "We're so proud of you, honey. Real estate isn't easy. It takes vision." Liam grinned. "Well, not everyone's built for it." I stirred my coffee slowly. "Apparently not," I said. He looked at me with that old smirk, the one that used to land every insult safely between the ribs. "Still in that little accounting job, Soph? Or did you finally trade up?" I smiled. "Still there. Numbers don't talk back. I like that." He laughed. "Yeah, but they don't grow much either." Dad chuckled under his breath. The room felt smaller, though the restaurant was wide open and bright. I looked at them all and realized how long I'd played this part. The quiet, predictable one who stayed polite so everyone else could stay comfortable. Mom passed me the bread basket, her tone light. "Where are you living now, sweetheart? Still at that cute apartment near the shops?" I took a sip of water before answering. "Still near the coast." "Oh, the little rental by the cliff?" Liam said, already half smiling at his own joke. "Something like that," I said. He laughed again, waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. I just met his eyes and smiled. The silence after that stretched longer than he expected. He filled it with noise. "You know, I've been thinking about buying something out that way. Cliffview Drive, right? Great area. Probably out of my budget, though. Those listings are insane." His wife, Emily, was scrolling through her phone. She glanced up suddenly. "Wait, the Cliffview property? That's on the market for $5 million?" The sound of silverware stopped. Mom blinked, confused. $5 million? Emily turned the screen toward her, frowning. "Here, look, Cliffview Estate. Oceanfront glass house, used to belong to some painter. It says sold last week, cash buyer." The air tightened. I didn't move. Dad leaned in slightly. "What's that address again?" "Same one you were just talking about," Emily said. "Cliffview Drive." Liam laughed, too loud. "Well, whoever bought it's either crazy or loaded." I smiled softly. "Maybe both." He looked at me again, searching for the punchline. I didn't give him one. I let the quiet do the work. Mom tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. You've always liked that area, haven't you, Sophie? I nodded. It's peaceful. Too peaceful for me, Liam said, pushing his plate aside. I need energy, movement, action. I watched him gesture like a salesman, all motion and noise, and for the first time I saw what I used to envy. Not confidence, just performance. I used to think that too, I said softly. That success had to be loud to be real. He grinned, assuming I was agreeing with him. Exactly. But I wasn't. The conversation moved on without me. They started talking about mortgage rates, travel plans, a new car Liam wanted. I sat back and let their words fade into background sound. I didn't need to correct them or explain what I'd done. I didn't need validation from people who never noticed the weight I carried for years. For once, silence felt like power. I caught Emily watching me, her brow still furrowed. She opened her mouth to say something but stopped. Her eyes lingered, uncertain. Maybe she understood before the others did. I lifted my glass, calm. To new beginnings, I said. They all echoed it out of habit, clinking glasses without thought. But as I took a sip, I could feel it. The shift, the quiet reversal. They didn't know yet, and I didn't need them to. It was, I said quietly, setting my glass down. Not anymore. The words hung in the air like smoke no one wanted to breathe. My mother's fork paused midair, her hand trembling just enough to make the silver clink against the plate. My father leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing as if trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. Liam let out a short laugh. Come on, he said. You? You bought Cliffview? His tone was light, but his voice cracked halfway through it. I met his eyes. Yes, he blinked. With what money? Mine. Mom's lips parted, then closed again. Sophie, don't joke like that. I'm not joking. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. How could you afford something like that? I took a sip of water, calm, steady. By doing what you told me to do all those years, living within my means. Liam forced another laugh, louder this time. Oh, come on, Soph. You're saying you dropped $5 million in cash? You? Yes, I said softly. Me. No one spoke after that. The sound of the waiter pouring coffee at a nearby table felt almost deafening. I didn't feel proud or angry or even vindicated. I just felt free. I don't understand, Mom whispered. You never said anything. You never asked for help. I didn't need help. Her eyes darted to Dad's, searching for confirmation that what she was hearing couldn't be true. He stayed quiet, staring down at the tablecloth like it might offer answers. Liam leaned forward, voice tight now. So what? You've been hiding this? Building some secret fortune while we thought you were barely getting by? I wasn't hiding anything, I said. I just stopped explaining myself when no one was listening. He sat back, jaw clenched. For once, he didn't have a clever line. Mom shook her head slowly. You could have told us. I looked at her and smiled faintly. Would it have made any difference? Her face softened, but didn't answer. I already knew the truth. I thought back to every dinner table where my name had been a footnote, every comparison, every quiet sigh of disappointment. It wasn't anger that filled me now. It was release. Dad finally looked up. So, the listing was mine, I said. All of it. Emily hadn't moved since she spoke earlier. Her eyes stayed on me, curious, maybe even a little admiring. She understood what the others didn't, that this wasn't about wealth. It was about finally stepping out of the role they'd written for me. Liam tried again, his voice weaker now. You really think you're better than us because of this? I smiled. No, Liam. I just stopped thinking I was less. The silence after that wasn't heavy anymore. It was quiet in a way that felt right. Funny how silence feels different when it's finally yours. Would you tell them the truth? Or let them wonder? Mom's voice broke it. You used our savings, didn't you? I turned to her, calm, steady. No, I said. Just mine. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She looked down at her hands. The rings she'd polished before dinner, the same ones she used to twist when she didn't want to face something real. Dad cleared his throat, ready to say something, but thought better of it. Liam's expression flickered between disbelief and something I'd never seen on him before. Respect, maybe. I didn't need an apology. I didn't even need understanding. All I needed was that moment. The quiet between words, the look in their eyes, the soft click of truth settling where denial used to live. I let the silence stay. The phone started ringing early the next morning. At first, I thought it was a wrong number. Then another call came, then another. I didn't pick up any of them. By noon, my voicemail was full of curious voices that all sounded the same: surprised, polite, and a little too interested. Word travels fast in my family, especially when it's about something they never expected me to do. Aunt Carol left a message saying, "We heard about your purchase, dear. That's incredible. Maybe you could help your cousin with her mortgage issue?" Uncle Rob texted, "Congrats, kiddo. Never pegged you for the risky type. How'd you swing that?" Risky type. That one made me smile. I deleted them all without listening twice. By evening, Liam still hadn't called. His silence was louder than any of their voices. I knew him well enough to picture it. Him pacing around his kitchen trying to rewrite the story so he didn't look small inside it. Then Mom called, not to congratulate me, to check in. She started with, "Sweetheart, your father and I were just wondering if you had a moment to talk about finances." I said, "Mine or yours?" She hesitated. "Well, since things have changed, we thought maybe you could give us some advice. You've always been good with numbers." I almost laughed. Always. As if that had ever been something worth noticing before. I told her, "I'm not sure advice is what you want." "Of course it is," she said quickly. "We just thought it might be nice to talk about investment strategies as a family." There it was, the quiet rearranging of power. When they couldn't control the story, they tried to manage the optics. I kept my voice calm. "You don't need my advice, Mom. You've done fine managing other people's expectations." She didn't answer right away. "We're proud of you," she finally said. But the words sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced them just to see how they'd taste coming out. When we hung up, I stood by the window and watched the waves roll in. The sea didn't care who had the upper hand. It moved the same way it always did. Steady, quiet, endless. I realized then that no one had actually congratulated me. Not really. They hadn't celebrated me. They'd just recalculated their hierarchy. It wasn't about my success. It was about what it did to theirs. The next day, Liam still didn't call, but Dad did. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened, his voice was clipped, trying too hard to sound measured. "You've made your point, Sophie. Don't ruin the family over pride." I replayed it once, just to make sure I'd heard him right. Then I deleted it. Pride. That's what they called it when I stopped kneeling for their approval. I made tea and sat by the piano, letting the sound of the ocean fill the silence they'd left behind. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I just understood something I never had before. Peace doesn't come from being seen. It comes from not needing to be. I was sorting through a drawer in the study when I found it, folded carefully between an old tax file and a yellowed birthday card. The paper was thin, soft at the edges, written in my mother's perfect cursive. The date at the top stopped me. I was 16. I sat down by the window and started reading. It was a letter to my father, written while he was away on business. Her words flowed like silk. "Liam's teacher says he shows real promise. We've raised a leader. You'd be so proud." The next paragraph came slower. Sophie's quiet, still unsure of herself. She tries, bless her heart, but she doesn't quite shine the same way. I suppose every family has one who struggles to find direction. My hands trembled, but not from surprise. I'd always known what she thought. I just never had it in writing before. I set the paper on the desk and stared at the ink. It hadn't faded. Neither had the sentiment. For years, I'd carried that tone in her voice, the gentle condescension, the soft disappointment. It was the soundtrack to my life. Every achievement I'd worked for had been filtered through that quiet dismissal. Good job, honey. Maybe next time you'll get there. It wasn't cruelty. It was belief. Her belief that I'd never quite measure up. I folded the letter neatly, pressing the edges together. The sea outside was still, gray, almost glass. My reflection in the window looked calm, controlled. I opened the drawer beside me and took out the property deed. The paper felt heavier, deliberate. I placed the letter beside it, aligned perfectly. The past and the present, touching but no longer connected. I used to think love had to be earned, whispered. Now I see. Some people just have limits on theirs. The words came out quietly, but they filled the room. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I didn't feel the ache to be chosen. I closed the drawer, the sound soft, final. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. The evening light had shifted, gold now, clean and forgiving. I thought about how strange it was that healing didn't arrive like a storm. It came in silence, in small acts of putting things where they belonged. A faint breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying the faint scent of salt. The house felt alive around me, warm and settled. That's when I heard it. A knock at the door. Not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. I froze for a moment, listening. Then another knock, firmer this time. When I turned toward the sound, I saw his shadow through the frosted glass. Broad shoulders, familiar stance. Liam. He stood on my porch like a man who hadn't slept in days. When I opened the door, he tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Hey, he said, his voice low. Can we talk? I nodded and stepped aside. Sure, come in. He glanced around the house as he walked in, his eyes catching on the windows, the framed art, the quiet order of it all. He looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in presence. Nice place, he muttered. Thanks, I said softly. Coffee? He nodded, so I poured 2 cups and set them on the counter. The silence between us stretched thin. Finally, he cleared his throat. I'm in a bit of a situation, he said. The market's rough. The second property I bought, it isn't selling. Payments are piling up. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. He rubbed his temples. I might lose the house if I can't refinance soon. The bank's tightening up on loans and I need a cosigner, someone stable on paper. There it was. I looked at him, steady. You mean me? He nodded once, embarrassed. You've got the income, the assets. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. His voice cracked on that word. Desperate. For a moment, I thought about how many times he'd thrown my stability back at me like it was a flaw. How often he'd joked that I was too careful, too boring, too small to take real risks. I took a slow breath. You know, I said, I used to co-sign things for you all the time. He looked down, guilty. I remember. I helped with your first car, your tuition, even that business you started and forgot to close properly. He swallowed hard. I know, and I appreciate that. I really do. I took a sip of coffee and watched him fidget. It's funny, I said. You once told me I'd never own a house like yours. He looked up sharply, as if realizing too late where this was going. I remember that day, I continued. You'd just gotten your keys. You said it like a fact. Not cruelly, just certain. He winced. I didn't mean it that way. I know, I said. You meant it the way Mom always did, like a gentle truth. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I smiled faintly. Turns out, you were right. Mine's nothing like yours. The words landed soft, but they carried weight. He looked around again, slower this time. His gaze lingered on the ocean outside the window, the faint light brushing across the glass. He nodded, once, without looking at me. Guess not, he said quietly. We sat in silence for a while. He stirred his coffee, though he hadn't taken a sip. His hands trembled slightly. I felt no anger, no triumph, just distance, the kind that comes after understanding, not revenge. He finally stood up, still avoiding my eyes. I should go. You didn't finish your drink, I said. He shook his head. No, it's fine. At the door, he paused. You really did it, huh? I did, I said. And I did it quietly. He nodded again, a faint smile ghosting across his face. You always were the quiet one. I watched him walk down the path toward his car. The sound of gravel under his shoes faded into the wind. When the door clicked shut behind him, the house felt peaceful again. I looked at his untouched cup on the counter, steam fading. Then I poured it down the sink and rinsed the mug clean. Some things don't need saving. Some lessons just take time to find their way home. The first call came from my mother. She didn't say hello, just started with, "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" I let her words hang there, heavy and shaking. Then I asked quietly, "What do you think I've done?" You embarrassed your brother, she snapped. You humiliated him in front of everyone. Your father's furious, Sophie. He says you've turned us into gossip. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. People talk anyway, Mom. They always have. That's not the point, she said, her voice trembling between anger and fear. You've broken the family bond. You made Liam feel small. I could almost hear my father's voice behind hers, coaching her through the script. Tell her that, he'd say, like I was the one who'd burned the bridge they'd built out of their own lies. Funny, I said softly. The bond only mattered once I stopped carrying it. She went silent. Then came the sigh, the one that meant she was done trying to sound kind. You always twist things, Sophie. Always make yourself the victim. I said nothing. There was no use arguing with people who mistook boundaries for betrayal. When she realized I wasn't going to feed the fire, she ended the call without goodbye. A few minutes later, Dad called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail anyway, his voice low, heavy. You've really disappointed your mother. You could have handled this quietly. We don't air family. Business to outsiders. Outsiders. That was the word he used for truth. I didn't listen to the rest. I deleted it and set the phone on the counter. For the next few days, the calls came nonstop. Relatives, cousins, even old family friends pretending to be concerned. Every message sounded the same. No one asked how I was. They just wanted to know why I'd let the family fall apart. I didn't call anyone back. I didn't defend myself. I just turned off my phone and let the silence take over. There's a strange kind of peace in letting go. Not the gentle, healing kind people talk about, but the heavy one that comes after truth finally lands. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like gravity. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the ocean stretch out under the evening light. The water looked endless, patient, unbothered by the noise of people trying to rewrite history. They called it betrayal. But betrayal is just what truth looks like when it no longer serves the liar. I thought about every time they told me to stay quiet, to not make things worse, to be the bigger person. I had spent years being the bigger person in rooms where no one else stood tall. Now, for once, I didn't want to be big or small. I just wanted to be free. The phone buzzed again on the counter, lighting up with Mom's name. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then I slid it into a drawer and closed it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things unspoken, of boundaries long overdue, of everything I'd stopped needing to explain. I stood by the window and pressed my hand to the glass. The tide was rolling in slow, silver waves, pulling the world back into itself. It's strange, I whispered, the words barely reaching the air. How calm revenge can feel. When I saw their car pull up by the gate, I almost thought I was imagining it. It had been months. Not a call, not a text, just silence, and secondhand judgment passed through relatives. And now, here they were, my parents, standing outside my house like unexpected guests. My father waved awkwardly. My mother held a tin of something, probably cookies, the kind she used to bring when she needed to soften a conversation. I walked out slowly, my hand resting on the iron latch. You found it, I said quietly. Her smile wavered. We, wanted to see the house. For a second, I thought about saying no. Then I stepped aside. Come in. The gate creaked open, sunlight pouring across the path as they walked through. My father's shoes crunched against the gravel. My mother looked around as if the air itself felt unfamiliar. Inside, the light was different, clear and warm, spilling through tall windows that overlooked the sea. The house was simple, nothing extravagant, but it carried something they never gave me: peace. They stood in the living room, eyes roaming over the framed photographs, the books stacked neatly by the window, the faint hum of waves outside. My mother's hand brushed the arm of the sofa. This is beautiful, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I smiled. Thank you. She turned toward me, her eyes already glassy. We didn't know you could do this. Her words hung there, soft but cutting. They didn't know because they never asked. They never wanted to. I met her gaze and said, You never asked what I could do. For a moment, she didn't move. Her eyes darted toward my father, as if searching for something to say that would fix what years of silence had built. He stayed quiet, his hands folded behind his back, studying the view like it was easier to admire the ocean than face me. I poured them tea. We sat by the wide window where sunlight painted the floor in long golden lines. No one spoke for a while. The only sound was the clinking of cups and the distant call of gulls outside. It wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't even pride. It was distance. Clean, settled, unhurried. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself anymore. My mother finally said, Your brother told us he's been having trouble. We shouldn't have let things get so divided. I stirred my tea and looked out at the water. Divided? I repeated. That's an interesting word for choosing sides. She flinched. My father cleared his throat but didn't interrupt. I set the spoon down and leaned back. It's okay, I said softly. We all see what we want to see. You saw him as the one who'd carry the family name, and I was just the quiet one who'd make do. My mother looked at me then, and something in her eyes shifted, like she was realizing too late that quiet doesn't mean weak. She reached across the table, her fingers barely grazing mine. We were wrong, she whispered. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold her hand either. Maybe, I said, but I'm not here to balance the scales anymore. We finished our tea in silence. When they stood to leave, I walked them back to the gate. The wind carried the scent of salt and pine, wrapping around us in the kind of quiet that felt too fragile to break. My mother lingered by the car, her lips parting like she wanted to say more. My father stepped forward instead. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said quietly, You've made us proud. In your own way. The words caught somewhere between apology and acceptance. I nodded once. That's all I ever wanted, I said. They got in the car. I watched them drive away until the sound of the engine disappeared into the wind. Then I turned back toward the house, sunlight spilling across the open door, and let it close gently behind me. The mornings are quieter now. I wake to the sound of gulls and the faint rhythm of waves brushing the rocks below. The air smells like salt and rosemary from the small garden I planted near the porch. It's not much, just herbs, a few wildflowers, a lemon tree that's finally begun to bloom. But it's mine. Everything here is mine. I sit outside most days with my coffee, letting the sun warm my face before the world starts moving. I used to fill mornings with worry, lists, tasks, people to please, expectations to chase. Now, I let the silence do the talking. It says everything that ever needed saying. Sometimes I think about how strange peace feels when you're not used to it. It's not loud or triumphant. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives like the tide, slow, sure, deliberate, washing over what's left of who you used to be. A neighbor waves from down the path, and I wave back. We talk sometimes about the weather or her grandchildren. She doesn't know anything about my family, and I don't tell her. It's nice, being known only for who I am right now. not who I was when everything fell apart. I walk along the garden, trimming back the lavender. The smell catches in the wind, soft and clean. I remember how my mother used to tell me lavender never lasts through storms, that it's too fragile to withstand salt air. Yet here it stands, rooted, alive, thriving in a place she once said I'd never survive. I don't think about proving her wrong anymore. That used to drive me, to outwork, outlast, outshine, but it's exhausting trying to be seen by people who never wanted to look. I realize now I wasn't chasing pride. I was chasing permission to exist without apology. The house behind me is quiet. The light through the windows shifts across the floor like a living thing, slow and steady. I never imagined owning something that held this much calm. I don't fill it with noise or guests or the ache of trying to impress. I just let it breathe. I take a deep breath too. The ocean hums in the distance, its rhythm syncing with my heartbeat. For years, I thought revenge would come with fire, some grand explosion of justice that would make the world see what they'd done to me. But standing here now, I understand it differently. Sometimes revenge isn't fire, it's light, the kind that finally shows you your own reflection. It took years to learn that lesson. Years of wanting apologies that never came, recognition that never mattered. They can keep their pride, their stories, their quiet rewriting of what happened. I have something better, peace that doesn't need witnesses. The phone rings sometimes. I still see their names flash on the screen, but I don't always answer. It's not anger, it's just choice. You don't have to keep reopening the same door to prove it was once locked. Some relationships end not with a fight, but with a deep breath and a gentle turning away. I walk to the edge of the yard, where the grass meets the cliff. The sea stretches out endlessly, silver and wide. It doesn't judge. It just exists, moving with a patience I've come to envy. I whisper into the wind, I'm not proving anything anymore. The words feel lighter than I expected. Maybe that's what healing really is. The weight slowly lifting until you realize you've been carrying peace this whole time, just waiting to notice. I sit on the old wooden bench under the lemon tree. The fruit glows pale gold against green leaves. I remember planting it with shaking hands, wondering if it would even take root in this rocky soil. But it did. It grew anyway, just like I did. I think about all the people watching from afar, pretending to understand. They'll say I changed. Maybe I did. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped shrinking to fit the spaces they built for me. And in that quiet defiance, I finally became free. If you've ever been told you'd never measure up, I hope my story reminds you, peace is the best answer. And if it touched you, stay with me for more stories like this one. The light shifts again, softer now, brushing over the garden like a promise. I can hear the sea breathing, the world turning, life beginning again in small, ordinary ways. They built their walls with pride. I built my home with silence.